this is 24 hours of UX. So this is a full day event of nonstop content. It was initiated by myself, Peter Horvat, and my partner here in Geneva, Jesse Anton. We organized the digital strategy and user experience meetup and have been doing so for 6 years with physical events every month. But the current situation happened. So we realized that we're probably not the only team who are now unable to bring the valuable content that they usually do to their local teams. So we teamed up with 20 local event organizers from around the globe, from New Zealand through Nairobi, Malaysia, Morocco, Munich, all the way to the US and Canada. So next up, we actually do have Canada. I do want to thank our sponsors as well, who have kept this event free for you audiences. Those are Adobe XD and UXtesting.io. So they've been super helpful in also connecting us with the audience. So with that, I will call on the stage the Calgary team. I just love Canada. I lived there for a year. It's a great place. So all of you from the Calgary team, if you can click on the top right, there is the share audio and video, and then I will let you in. And while that is happening, just calling out that if you are, you can join individually. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. I'll call out. So this is the platform that we are using. It's called Hopin. At the reception where you landed, you can see the entire schedule for the rest of the event. Calgary is, together with Calgary, we have 4 more events happening. So we are done with 24 hours still coming up. And here in the stage, continuous 1 day full of UX related topics. In the sessions, that's where the teams, after their 1 hour, each team has a 1 hour presentation. And afterwards they go to the session where they have a more smaller, more intimate discussion where also the audience can join via audio and video. And if you feel like serendipitously bumping into someone, then go to networking where you get paired up for 5 minutes with a random person. So I think we have Vadim and Barbara. Welcome. Michael, just waiting to be let into the video. Michael, maybe, I don't know, ideally you should be using Chrome or Firefox. If you are not, then please do. And if you are, then maybe refresh and ask permission. Okay, perfect, you are. So maybe refresh and ask for permission again. You should be able to then get in, because I saw you, I let you in, but then something happened. I've been rushing through this. There's one thing that I want to do before we get started. So it's good morning, evening, or middle of the day for a lot of us. And in either case, I think today more than ever, it counts. Let's do a little stretching. Let's, spread the legs and hands. Very good. Upwards as well. I'll do a little side. What I'm realizing after 20 hours is really the back. So apparently stretching is very good for you. So I'll do a bit of that. And Michael, here you are. Perfect.
There's me.
So while I was playing around with myself. Another thing I realized in the polls that Jesse and Susan Weinschenk were, while I was away, were competing on whose bookshelves are better. So I took some of my books and brought them here. So I'm not the only one who appears without books. It's really, really lame there.
All I have is quilting supplies. So, whatever.
Not bad. So over to you, Calgary. The stage is yours. You have 54 minutes, and please, I will be around to help you out. So message me on backstage or on the event, or just call out Peter, and I'll be right here.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. I guess we'll kind of jump right into it. Sorry about that. It must be my Canadian internet connection, but I'm here now, and so here we go, ready to go. Welcome to.
I love it. Like you are. This is so Canadian. Starting with a sorry.
Sorry, eh? Yeah, typecast achieved. Okay. Welcome to our event about delivery in e-commerce. We are Mike and Barbara in this room from the Calgary UX group, and we have Vadim with us as well from Shopify. And I think we're going to have a really good discussion here today. So Barbara and I are a couple of the organizers from the Calgary UX group. Luis is also online in here somewhere, and he's lurking and probably watching for questions and things like that. So feel free to drop questions as you go in the chat, and I'm sure somebody will be watching for those. So we are located, as mentioned, in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where we have finally achieved summer in the last couple of weeks or so. So that's nice to finally be there. I'm sure folks from Scandinavia can probably relate, so that's all good. For this event, Calgary UX is partnered with the 24 Hours of UX for any of the folks from Calgary UX who are watching, which is, as Peter mentioned, a grassroots nonprofit initiative bringing live content to the global UX community for one day. That's today. And I think we're getting further down in the line here. This has been going on for a long time with a lot of really great talks. So our 1 hour event here today is going to be for the next hour. And yeah, it's great. So we encourage everyone to check out the other events by clicking on reception on the left or going to 24hoursofux.com. I think I have a note here that we can give a minute or so for other people to join, but we can probably, seeing as we're kind of into the hour, just jump right into it. So with that, maybe I will pass it over to Barbara and we can talk about a little bit of housekeeping.
Sure thing. Okay, so we just wanted to cover a couple of things before we get started. First, I want to say a big thanks to our event sponsors, Adobe XD and UXtesting.io. This whole event wouldn't be happening without them, so we're really thankful and grateful that they are a part of this and helping us put it on. And second, we just wanted to mention a couple of ground rules. So as we welcome the world into Calgary UX's space, we want to let you know that our meetup group is a professional networking and collaboration community, and it exists to support every single one of its members. So we recognize and protect the inherent worth of every person in this group. So we ask that while you're in our virtual space, and you're very welcome here, we just expect everyone to behave with respect, kindness, and professionalism. And I feel like that goes without saying with this group. I've been watching the events for a little while, and everyone seems to be very respectful, but we just wanted to put that out there. For anyone who just joined, we just want to talk about how Hop-In works a little bit. I think Peter covered it. If you want to take a look at the other events that are happening after this, you can click reception on the left. Stage is where we are. There's also sessions. That's where you can drop in there afterwards if you want to continue this discussion. Just look for the Calgary section. And then there's also networking. That's where you can get paired up with a random person for 5 minutes of serendipitous discussion. So that's pretty fun. I think that's all of our housekeeping for now. I'm going to pass it off to Mike to get into the meat of the talk.
Sure, thanks. So I guess let's get into it. So today we are lucky to be joined by Vadim Slav, and I think hopefully I've got your name right there.
You got it.
Senior UX manager at Shopify. We are doing a Canadian spanning session today with Vadim in Ottawa, and we're in Calgary, Canada. So that's a true Canadian experience right here for the rest of the world to check out. The format that we've decided to go with today is kind of an interview format. We're going to leave 10 minutes at the end for audience questions. So as I mentioned earlier, feel free to drop your questions into the chat, and hopefully we'll have somebody watching that and coming back to us. So with that, let's get right into it. So Vadim, thank you so much for being with us here today, and we're excited to be talking to you as part of the Canadian contingent for the 24 Hours of UX.
Thank you for inviting me to this.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe just to start off, talk a little bit about yourself. So who you are and where you're from, what Shopify does.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's always it's a hard part to, what do I say in an intro? So I'm a designer, essentially. I've been a designer for quite some time, for more than 20 years now. And I'm currently leading UX group at one of Shopify product lines. So Shopify is divided into product line that are responsible for different parts of Shopify platform. And I specifically work at Shopify shipping. So my product line is responsible for everything that has to do with shipping and delivery of merchants. And that's essentially the logistic part of that. And I lead UX. There are 3 teams in my group that's responsible for 3 main areas. We're responsible for our shipping and delivery, Shopify Fulfillment Network. Which is it's a relatively new initiative by Shopify that we launched last year, and also warehousing. So that's in a few words about myself. For those who don't know what Shopify do, so Shopify is essentially a commerce platform, and I would like to actually say that it is a commerce. It's not just e-commerce, because a lot of people think that Shopify just provides solutions for, for merchants selling online. But in fact, Shopify provides a whole suite of different products and solutions for people who want to run their business, and basically for merchants of all different sizes, from very small mom and pop shops to a pretty large brands that's sell on Shopify. Shopify is a Canadian company. It started in Canada, started in Ottawa, and has grown worldwide since then. So it's a global commerce company at this point.
That's really cool. So thank you for that. It's interesting, always interesting to hear about the different places that you find UX. For me, that's always been one of the really interesting things about events like this, is you hear about all the different types of industries and verticals that have UX involved in them. So over 20 years of a design career, that's awesome. I'm in about the same boat. I'm interested in hearing a little bit about your background and how you kind of came to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as many other UXers that are in this field, my path to UX was non-linear. I actually, so I got into design pretty early on. So that was like mid-90s. It was just way before I think UX even existed as a term. It was really just about web design. And I was sort of lucky, because one of my first jobs that I was able to work as a designer is working with a software development, like a tiny software development team. And that's where I really learned to, appreciate how is it to build like a software product with thinking about their users. And so I initially studied actually electronic engineering, so I've got to study design only later on. And I spent a few years working as a UI designer in a software companies. I worked for a few years for Microsoft as a web designer. And then I actually got into digital advertising and spent a pretty significant chunk of my career in digital advertising. Basically building marketing and advertising campaigns for a lot of different brands. But about 8 years ago, I felt that I really want to get back to kind of my roots and where I started, which is UX. And I joined another Canadian company that I think which many Canadians would know, and probably other folks around the world. So it was at the time it was ING, so it's a bank or financial institution. That became later in Canada Tangerine. So I led the UX team there. Then from there on, I made a surprising jump to Canada Post, which is, again, a lot of people think when I say Canada Post, when I used to say Canada Post, they were asking, is it a newspaper? So no, Canada Post is a Canadian postal service. So I spent about 3 years at Canada Post building and leading the UX team there. And then about 2 years ago, I joined Shopify, and so still in the same domain, so shipping and delivery and fulfillment. But that's my path, like very not linear, a lot of different industries. But that's one of the things that I really love about UX. I think the core skills really allow us to apply it to pretty much any industry. Of course, there are specifics, but that's the basics stay the same.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that about the Canada Post experience. I have as a customer of Canada Post, I can't help it. It's been interesting to watch over the years the progression of their digital presence and just how good it is. It feels very progressive on the outside, and so it's neat to see how their products have evolved. So I'm sure that was a neat experience. But now we're at Shopify. A typical day in the life. What does a typical day in the life at Shopify look like for you?
Yeah, so I think as for many people who lead teams, my day consists of a lot of meetings, which is an unfortunate part of that. Sometimes, and I think, the new digital reality has made it even harder. But there's, so there's a lot of meetings, and like those, there are different types of meetings. So I have a large chunk of those actually involve working on UX. So whether it's reviewing work of my team, so providing critiques, and as well as any other UX rituals, connecting with various UX folks across Shopify. I think one of the Shopify strengths is like we have a fairly large UX organization, and there's a lot of knowledge and experience, and we are also building our product to ensure that there's a consistency between different parts of that. So it's working with people, in other product lines and other areas of organization, as well as working with many other folks and my, folks on my product line. So engineers, product managers, data scientists. We do have a very collaborative approach to building products, and then so we work very closely together. So there's a lot of that, syncing and making sure that we are trying to, optimize for more asynchronous communication, but meetings is still a large part of my day.
Yeah, I feel you there. I feel like I've only been in meetings today, so it's that's sometimes just the kind of the way it goes. It's interesting. You talked a little bit about kind of the new digital reality, and something that folks from around the world might not be familiar with is that Shopify recently announced they're moving to a completely remote workforce. It's an interesting transition. I mean, I moved accidentally to a completely remote workforce with my current job because, well, we're kind of all in the same boat at this point. But now this is like a purposeful move. Was it COVID that did that, or is that like that's something that Shopify is really striving to do? How's that going to change things for you guys?
That's a great question. So the main driver for that is obviously the situation we're all in right now, which is the COVID. But I think, the company leadership thinking about what does it actually mean for us after that. And the reality is that a lot of things are, and at least that's what many people believe, are going to change. So Shopify has invested a lot and built a great environment for, for its employees to work in physical environments. And in fact, Shopify have strongly believed in that co-location. So one of the things then for people who've ever, thought about Shopify, like one of the conditions for most people were actually moving to one of the locations where Shopify had physical offices. But that unfortunately could no longer be the reality, even after like those spikes are gone. Again, I think even after the vaccine is found, like there's like that reality of working in the office is no longer be the same as it was before. So we're trying to think what is the next best thing for that, and the next best thing is really being digital by default. And like it's, to be honest, it's not an easy, it's not a simple shift. And as many people we have excited about this, there are an equal number of people who have strong feelings about it and that don't know exactly how it's going to work for them. Mm-hmm. But we are hopeful that we'll make it work together. So that's and so far so good. We've been remote for 2.5 months, and we've actually been very, very productive during that time.
That's great. The secret of my success has been my lava lamp. It's the best, and lots of Dr. Pepper. Honestly, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pass it over to Barbara here, and let's to get a little bit more into the specifics of shipping and delivery and e-commerce and commerce in general, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, Barbara, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. So I just wanted to put a shout out to everyone to let you know that we do have 10 minutes reserved at the end for your questions. So if you have questions throughout, I've seen a couple, keep them coming. That would be great. Okay. So let's talk about what UX is like in your industry right now, Vadim? Because I think alongside healthcare, shipping, delivery, and commerce might be one of the most important industries right now. It's certainly one of the things that we talk about the most during the pandemic. Lots of businesses have had to pivot by using an online store instead of solely a storefront. And we're seeing every business who sells things and sends things to people operate differently. Now, I know you've been in this world a lot longer than just the pandemic, spanning your experience at Canada Post and now at Shopify. So I can only imagine from a UX standpoint, your world was already very complex with lots of touch points, and now it's become even more complex with lots of users, probably some with conflicting goals. So let's talk about what it's like to work in this industry generally and right now. So can you tell me a little bit about why this is so interesting as a UXer?
That's a great question. And I think at a surface level, when I used to talk to people about being a UXer for and working on like postal or delivery products, like people, their general first response was just, well, like this is like a very boring, like I don't want to get to that. It's like, what can you think, what can possibly be interesting about designing experience for shipping products? But the reality is that the challenges we're dealing with are very complex, and for people who who appreciate really meaty problems to deal with and understand that, I think this is a great opportunity. It goes into understanding a full logistics chain. How does it actually work? It doesn't work that you just ship your product and it magically appears at the other side. There are so many parts that involved in making that experience. And for UXers who want to work in that, the challenge goes way beyond just thinking about the physical aspect, about the digital aspect of that. It's really thinking about that experience end to end and what it could mean for both sides. So thinking about the commerce, what does it mean for thinking about the both sides, both buyer and the merchant who uses that? And there's obviously, so as you mentioned, like the new reality made it even more challenging because obviously, the carriers are like the couriers, like all the different companies are have a huge load of work, and that impacts their service levels and how they handle that. There's a lot of new businesses that simply have never dealt with that and now have to figure out how to do that and then how to ship their product. And so the range of challenges the UXers in this field are dealing with is huge, right? So it's thinking about this whole service experience. It's thinking how does experience that the merchant provides impacts their buyers, because that has direct correlation to the return users, the return customers, and their ability to retain those customers. And so there's a lot, and shipping is much more complex than it seems on a surface. And like there are many different methods people do their delivery. There are many different like services that are available. And again, like we are working, like it's not just one of the challenging part of that is not just the products we're building also rely on the services that other companies provide us, right? So like we working with with postal services, with courier services. So yeah, that's basically like the essence of that. But it's
it's basically not a big deal. It sounds very complex, and I think you touched on a couple of things, but I wonder if there's anything in particular that you remember being kind of surprising or really interesting about working in shipping and delivery.
Yes, I think the most surprising it's still the amount of bad experiences that exists despite the increasing trends in e-commerce, and that those experiences should become better. It's surprisingly how many pretty horrible experiences still exist in this industry throughout the whole thing. I have two very specific examples. One was very early on, like when I was still at Canada Post, and there was a shipping tool for businesses essentially that our business customers were supposed to use. And we ran some research on that, and like the results were pretty horrible. And like that tool was not touched in many years. And now seeing, in my new role, in like my role at Shopify, as I mentioned, like one of my teams working on warehousing products, and as a result, we've been looking into what's those experiences look at warehouses. You would be surprised to find out how many of those experiences go way back to, at least, I think we 15, maybe even sometimes more years ago, just so that you would see, things basically running Windows 95 and people, that's most of the new comers to the field don't probably even know what that, but like those experiences are pretty horrible. But then again, expectation for this industry is to be efficient, and like with increasing load, like you can't be efficient without good tools. So this was the big surprise for me. So the bottom line here, there's a lot to improve. So there's a lot of work for UXers or any people who build products for them in that field, which is, I guess is a good thing, but it's surprisingly that experience is bad.
Yeah, I can see how it's not something that everyone gets to see, that back end of the shipping process. You just kind of place an order, and then a couple of weeks later it shows up at your house, hopefully. Yeah. Which is probably another aspect of the process when things don't show up. But as how the problems to solve must be infinite.
Yeah.
And I wonder, do you have any stories about a time that you really made a difference in one of those problems, or any favorite projects that you can talk about a little bit?
Yeah. So the time that I've made a difference, I think, this is different for individual contributors and people who lead teams. And for my last few roles, I've been in the positions where I led teams. And I feel that like the real difference that a team leader can make is building and providing great foundation for their teams to build those great experiences. And I hope that I did, pretty good job on doing that, because, looking at the products that my team built and delivered. But specifically, if we're talking about the project, some of their favorite projects that come to mind, I will name a few from, from both of my current role and as well as my role at Canada Post. At Canada Post, one of my favorite projects is that business tool that, like, after we realize how bad it is, like we actually redesigned and rebuilt that in a very short time. And that served as a foundation of that tool actually has continued to grow and build. And then it later become a shipping tool for consumers. So like if you're a consumer, you want to build that. And then it has continued to grow and evolve, and still to this point. So this is definitely one of my favorites. The second thing that I'm proud of, and Michael, you mentioned how surprised you were just to seeing, Canada Post evolution. And we actually were one of the few. So for those of you who don't know, Canada Post is a government corporation. That means it's, so it's usually much slower to evolve and kind of think about, the forward-thinking things. We were one of the few government organizations that actually launched our design system. So we worked and we built and launched Mercury, which is Canada Post design system that most and all of the products that are now building and built on that. But now going back to Shopify, the two things that are absolutely my favorite is one is Shopify Fulfillment Network, which is the service that we're building, and it's continuously evolving. There's a lot there. As I mentioned, there's as a fulfillment service is actually it's a whole service. So it's thinking about that experience end to end. And that is the part that I absolutely love about this. And my last one that I will mention is the product that we've just recently, literally a couple of weeks ago, we shipped, and it's just called local delivery. And that is very relevant to our merchants in the current situation. So where a lot of merchants, especially local merchants who did not have a presence, or they still want to continue, or they want to shift to and actually shift their business to online, they shifting to local delivery, basically delivering their product themselves. And this is like a very required and needed service for merchants, and we recently shipped, and we continue to roll out additional features for that. The reason that it's favorite, and I'm really proud of that, it's the way we built that. It's basically, there are many teams across Shopify that came together to build it and make it a reality in a record short time. It was literally built in a matter of, I think, less than 2 months.
Wow.
And it's a pretty big achievement. So still lots of work to be done, but yeah, we're proud of it.
That's wild. 2 months. Oh my gosh. It's when you're talking about local merchants, I know that local can mean a lot of different places. Shopify is a global company, and there's people who are using Shopify all over the world. So I wonder if we can talk a little bit more about the work that you're doing now. Specifically, how do you design for specific countries and cultures and even governments?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So Shopify is a global country, and we have a full commitment to all our merchants basically throughout the world. However, the way that Shopify has grown from from where it was born, which is Canada and the US, and it has grown from that center. So there is still a lot of the things that we have. They are more tailored to our user base, which is in the US and Canada and other big countries. But we continuously working on expanding to other countries. We actually have a dedicated international product line that the whole role is to basically take care of all their other countries. And that starts with internalization. So making sure that our products actually translated, and not just translated, but actually properly fitted to those locales that we are, those markets we operate in. It also understanding those specific markets. So and I will actually get into, so depending on where you are and depending what country you're in, there are different regulations, different needs, and there's just simply different habits and behaviors. So as an example, there are some countries that actually require customers to put their, I believe for tax purposes, to put their additional information that is not required for let's say for US and Canada. There's a lot of countries in Europe where delivery actually works not to a specific home or an apartment, but to a pickup point. So there's a lot of that work of first of all, understanding the reality and the behavior of users in that country. And that means understanding both the buyer side and the merchant side. And then figuring out a way how we can get there, because ideally we don't want to rebuild our products. So we want to make sure that we can adapt them, and then how can we extend them to that other market.
Right.
So it's a pretty long process, and again, sometimes we have, as I mentioned, we have a whole product line that looks into other countries, but we all other product lines work with them to ensure we cover each area specifically. So as a quick example that I can give, we recently on Shopify Shipping, we recently launched Shopify Shipping in Australia. Where it was previously only in the US and Canada, and right now Australian merchants can use Shopify Shipping in Australia. And
that's really cool. Mike has messaged me that it must be fun to talk about shipping a shipping product internally.
It's a wonderful meta there.
Yes. So I have a small joke. So all product teams at Shopify, when they ship a product, they the taglines has basically shipping, and then they specify what they're shipping. but it feels like, there's constantly shipping. And when we're shipping something from our product line, it's shipping. So.
That's amazing.
Oh my gosh. Another question a little about how you work globally and or even not globally, just in general, how there's so many different users and different needs across the world. I imagine doing user research is quite an operation, especially with so many different touch points. There must be service design involved. Can you tell me a little bit about the process for doing that design and the research to make sure that you're meeting the needs? And maybe a little bit about like methodologies and strategies that you use to capture that wide range of information.
Yeah. So the interesting thing, I don't think that we necessarily have, a different process. So I will take a step back. Shopify is, in its core, is very user-centric company, and I can honestly say that I worked for quite a few companies before, and Shopify is by far the most user-centric company. But that distance to the front lines, how we define that, is not the responsibility of just UXers or user researchers. Is actually, there's an expectation for everyone in the company to be close to the to the front lines, basically close to our merchants. We recently joked that one of our engineering teams, like engineers there, are actually probably talk to our merchants more frequently than our researchers, just because of the nature of their role, and they had to interact. So in general, everyone is Shopify is very close to merchants. Now, we also pretty lucky too that our users are very open and open to collaborate and work with us. So we use, depending on the phase of the project, on phase of what we're building, we obviously leverage various methods. So it's ranging from from interviews to surveys to usability studies to field studies. Obviously, these days with COVID, we can do a lot of that, but when we will go back to when the situation will improve, and definitely before that, the research teams and the UX teams in general were doing quite a lot of in-person studies, meaning that they were visiting merchants, they were visiting them in their own environment. So it's important for us to understand. So we do a lot of remote research, but it's also, of course, important to understand the actual reality and physical environment. So specifically, if we talk about shipping and delivery, it's how merchants prepare for that. Like, what is their setup? Like, how do they prepare? Like, depending on the number of the orders they get, what is their setup looks like? Do they have a dedicated space? How they organize the orders? And it directly impacts our work as UX team, because by understanding the reality of the merchants, so how do they approach that? Like, how do they sort their orders? Do they pack them first? Do they pack them all the orders and then they label them, right? So it's obviously it's important for us to understand how we build our digital part of that experience. And another example that I will bring, so as I mentioned, for the warehousing, we've done an ethnography study understanding the reality of people who work in the warehouses. One of the things that we really kind of pride ourselves on that, like, we want to create experiences that are also great for people, right? So this is one of our principles for building Shop Fulfillment Network. We want to ensure that the experience is not great only to merchants and buyers, the two sides of the e-commerce, but also to the people who are involved in that. So actually fulfilling the orders on behalf of merchants. And these people, I think, we've heard in the recent months, we've heard about how bad that experience could be in certain companies. And we care about that. So, and that means, like, we want to understand their reality of people who are working in the warehouses. What does it mean for them? Like, what actually inspires them, and like, what are their and you would be surprised. There are quite a few the companies we work with for our Shop Fulfillment Network. Actually, their employees have pretty good engagement, and then they're quite happy. So it's very pleasantly surprising to see that.
That always makes for good research when they're happier people to interview. I mean, maybe not juicier, but at least easier for you. Okay, I think I'm going to pass it off to Mike here. He's going to ask a few questions about working during the time of COVID-19.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. Yeah, just a quick check. We're at 7:42 here, our local time, so we're running to the last few minutes of the presentation, but we'll dive into these questions about COVID-19 and kind of go from there. So just kind of interested, how have you seen traditional e-commerce and shipping changing because of this COVID-19 lockdown?
Yeah, so I think it's not a secret, and everyone realizes that this has been a huge shift in commerce in the last few months. Obviously, simply due to the new reality where a lot of businesses had to close their retail spaces because of the lockdown, and they were simply not allowed to open. So that forced a lot of businesses, and it's like literally forcing them to shift to e-commerce. And we've seen a huge shift for like all businesses, whether it's like, again, like small businesses that just thought that it's probably not relevant for them, to huge brands that were just simply not set up properly for that new world. All of them switching literally in a matter of weeks and sometimes days to that new reality, because it's no longer about providing additional channel for your customers to buy your product and to to transact with you. It's a matter of survival for businesses. Like businesses who do not shift, they could simply go out of business. So e-commerce, it's obviously a huge shift to that, and as a result, there's also a huge shift in fulfilling those orders using delivery and shipping. So specifically on my side, on where I work, we've seen like a huge influx of people start using our solutions more and more than they used before COVID. It also has to do with a part of our solutions is actually providing shipping labels directly from the platform. And that means that they don't have to go to the post office to do that. So people try to minimize their interaction and being in public places if they can do that from their store, from their home. So we've seen a pretty big shift to our solutions we provide. With that obviously comes, there's some, with the difficulties that the couriers are experiencing, I think there's a shift in terms of the expectation that the buyers have. Like it takes much longer now for deliver product, and like that communication is very important from the merchants to the buyers. And sometimes merchants do not have control over that.
Mm-hmm. So with all the adaptations and changes that you're seeing, are these temporary measures or is this forever? What do you think?
It's a great question. I personally believe that most of these will be long-term, and I think in some cases even permanent. We are talking about behavioral change. I think it's not just about, like it's a temporary and then like everything goes back to normal. I'm sure for, all of us who've been at the physical stores that have started opening up in the, recent weeks, like we realize that the experience is not the same. There's a huge lineups even to get to the store. There are huge lineups in the store. So people really would start asking themselves, like, is that worth that, or can they find an alternative? And alternative obviously is what they were doing when everything was closed. So I personally believe that change would be definitely for a much longer time, because I think the brick and mortar retail would have to evolve as well. I don't think it will remain exactly the same as the pre-COVID situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear this from the shipping side, the shipping perspective of things, because I mean, I have been the shopping designee for my house, so I'm the grocery getter, and I may be a sick person, but I have actually enjoyed going to the grocery store just as a UX person, the human observation and how people track through their journeys throughout their shopping process and how that has changed. And it's been interesting to see how different people adapt. So like I said, maybe that's just because of where we've come from as designers, or maybe it's because I'm weird. I don't know. But how in this world now, how has your team had to adapt to this changing world? Like, I'm out shopping, but you guys are designing for the backbone of a lot of this stuff. How has this affected your design team's process?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think we are obviously trying to adapt as much as we can, and certain things, certain rituals that we had before when we all when we are all in the office, those rituals no longer possible. I think one of the biggest things that came up very early on is just because, so how are we going to whiteboard together, right? So this is something that's Shopify had, like, we literally had like walls that were just whiteboards, right? So any way you want to jump on whiteboarding, you could do that, and you can just start doing that. With this new reality where everyone being remote, I think it's a matter of, for us personally as UXers, how do we adapt our processes and the ways we were doing design and creating user experience to the new reality. We've definitely, we've adapted since it all began. But I do believe that, the tools we have right now will have to evolve as well. They're okay. And I mean, they definitely, allow us to do our work, but is it the most efficient most efficient way to work together? And I think, a lot of UXers really enjoy working together. There's a lot of benefits of that. So, and I think we need tools to support that.
Right. And maybe kind of the final question for me, and then maybe we'll see what other questions are coming from some of the folks watching from around the world. We've been monitoring the questions a little bit, and actually a bunch of the stuff that folks are asking, we've been managing to cover in a lot of our conversations here. So that's kind of good. So we'll open it up for some more questions in a bit. But one that came from the field, and one that we're curious about too, is have you changed the tools you're using? Like what tools do you use now versus before?
Yeah. So no, we didn't necessarily change our tools. So for our digital tools, we have so one of the tools that we unfortunately can't use right now. So we had Google has this pretty good digital whiteboard solution which we had in our offices, and like it's really great too. So it's video conference combined with digital whiteboarding. That unfortunately does not exist, so neither like the regular whiteboards. So we still use some of the regular tools we have, which is like pen and paper, and then we just snap photos and we share, whether it's Slack or other tools, or but the tools we've used before COVID and that we're using now, we're using Figma. So Shopify using Figma as a primary design tool. All by UXers and engineers and product managers. So like that's something that we continue to use, and we actually getting better and better with that. So we've been running workshops on Figma and like collaborating like with the whole teams on that. We're using Miro as well. Yeah, so in general, like we didn't really change our tools since we are I think there's a list of features that we would like to be added to these tools, and but yeah, we're still using the same tools we've used before.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we've mostly managed to do the same thing where we're at too. We just kind of do it from home now instead of in the office. But I definitely miss the in-person collaboration for some brainstorming sessions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that part is definitely missing.
Yeah, so a couple of questions that we're seeing coming in from the field, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I just had a notification pop over the one I was about to read. There we go. Okay. Is Shopify providing different equipment now that folks are working remotely?
So Shopify, and I think this was actually that was published publicly when we all went remote. Shopify have provided a budget for all its employees to basically, equip their new environments as they think that, just to make that environment as best as we need. Now, in terms of any specific equipment, no, we all have our laptops and our monitors. So that's pretty much when talking about equipment, that's the equipment we have. That equipment is the same equipment that we were using when we were in the office, right? So that's didn't really change.
Right. And switching scales entirely from the equipment that they're using day to day to more of a kind of a broad Shopify question. What do you think that the Shopify brings to its customers? I mean, we went from a small company in Ottawa to a global company. What makes you guys stand out?
Yeah,
that's a tough one. That's okay too.
No, I'll try to answer that from my perspective, and I think there are a few points, and actually I will try to answer that from UX perspective. So first of all, Shopify had design in its DNA pretty much from day one, and I think this was definitely so. It's it was built with design in mind, and one of their few people who started Shopify, who was responsible for design culture and building that on Shopify from pretty much from day one. So I think that's and then thinking about the experiences and thinking about users. So as I mentioned, like Shopify is very user centric. So that is definitely one of the things that I think makes Shopify successful. The other thing about Shopify is and how we build our products. So Shopify there are actually two principles kind of that I want to mention. Is that one of that is that we want to make sure that when we're building our products, we're making the most core experiences as simple as possible for our users. And then we provide an opportunity for our partners and so Shopify has a huge partner ecosystem that build apps and provide services to merchants. So Shopify doesn't try to cover every single need our merchants have. We build the most core needs of our merchants, and we make sure that we build those very well. So there's a lot of attention we put into into building this. But then we provide an opportunity for other partners to build those other needs that our merchants might need. And obviously, with the growing user base of Shopify merchants, there's a whole plethora of things that merchants need. But we also have a pretty large ecosystem of partners who build those solutions for them. And I think that's what makes it, and that's one of the principles that we try to apply to everything we build. Even like specifically touching on Shop Fulfillment Network, that is also our approach in that. We're not trying to centralize and own it all. We build solutions and platform, and we provide others to build on top of that.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear. So I think what we're going to do at this point is we're going to wrap up, and maybe Peter, if it's okay, I just wanted to ask Vadim. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly ask Vadim for any final comments, anything you want to say of stuff going on at Shopify right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I think, we are lucky to be in the company that's, continues to thrive, and we want other people to help us to build those experiences. So I think there's a lot for us to make that experience better for everyone. So we at Shopify, we are hiring, and we're hiring all across different, product lines and different disciplines, as well as specifically on my team as well. So, for anyone listening, please check out our opportunities, and also you can feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and I'll be more than happy to chat about our opportunities.
That's terrific. Thanks so much for your candor today. We put you through the ringer a little bit, so we really appreciate the time with us here today. I think I'll pass it over to Peter here. I think we have the Las Vegas guys waiting in the wings and we're waiting to get in here. And
yes,
so
I do want to wrap up with you guys with one a little question. I don't know what it's called exactly. I was at the conference last year in Canada, and I don't know if it was called land acknowledgement at the beginning of every event, where there's basically a thanks being said to the tribes who owned the land originally. And I was wondering, like, I was thinking maybe we should do something like that for this event at the beginning. But I was struggling, like, well, this is a global event, but I guess then the land acknowledgement would go out to all the peoples of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a super poignant thing that's happening, given lots of events that are happening in the world right now. I know whenever I go to assemblies and concerts at my kids' schools, that always starts with a land acknowledgement. Generally, any government events or things that are happening around town or in the province, that starts with the same thing. And that it's becoming more and more prevalent across Canada.
I have marked it as one of my sort of ideas to steal, because I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, and it's good because it's opening avenues that have kind of long been closed, and it'll grow. Yeah.
So Calgary, that was super smooth, your event. It was very well managed. Chapeau bas. So really, really well done. Thank you very much. So for all of you who want to continue the discussion around the UX of e-commerce, you can go to, on the left-hand side of your screen, you should see a sessions tab or menu. You can click on that, and that'll take you to the sessions where you will be able to select Calgary, Canada, and then just go there and continue this discussion in more of a more an intimate session where you can also join by audio and video. So thank you very much, Calgary team.